So I thought we could have coffee chat, not just on Sunday. I love having those coffee chats, a little music in the background. My favorite coffee in all of my small town at Marzano's, the restaurant where my daughters work. And so I share a little bit about what's been going on in my world, but I'm also trying to connect with you every Sunday on our coffee chat. And I kind of want to get to know you better. And I want to know, is this account, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, really serving you in your homeschool and in your life? And that's my goal. And first of all, I have a real live cup of coffee, probably too many today. I think I've lost track of how many, but real coffee in my real coffee cup. And I thought, why don't I just bring this live once a week and have a chat with you? So I've been thinking, Homeschool Mama Self-Care. The intention around this account is to bolster you, to help you find quiet spaces in your homeschool days, to help you figure out how to do this homeschool thing over the long term, to feel supported, to learn how to nurture the nurturer. All of those things, so very important. But as I spend a lot of time sifting through what's the most important thing, what are the things that I think that you need to grapple with or to address if it's something that you haven't addressed, then I look at all the different elements in my own life, in my own journey, and how I've come to a place of being able to enjoy it just a whole bunch more and to have a feeling, a fullness of freedom in it. And to be carefree and not to be worried about what other people think, or certainly not to feel overwhelmed anymore. There are some key things that I've participated in or that I've put into practice that have helped me do that. And it's not neat. It's definitely messy. It's definitely a lot of effort. But there are certain things over the course of time that have helped me a lot. So the things that I see as some of the biggest areas recently when I'm chatting with you or chatting with a few of you behind the scenes, there's a big discussion about overwhelm, a big discussion on boundaries. But that overwhelm thing, I think, is kind of nebulous. It's hard to pin down because it's a feeling of like too much is going on, too many activities, or you're not quite sure what is the thing that feels overwhelming. So sometimes we need to start at that building block and say, what's the thing going on underneath there? And then I look at boundaries and I say, I think boundaries are just a little bit more of a clarification of what that overwhelm was. Because usually our overwhelm is somehow a result of not managing our boundaries. Boundaries is a nebulous concept. It's one of those things that are really hard to pin down because a lot of people have different definitions for what that word means. And so I'll just throw something out there, and it's not any more right than any other definition of boundaries. But for you and I to understand each other and what that might mean, I'll tell you that my perception of what a boundary is recognizing where I stop and where you start. So the difference between those two things. But the thing with boundaries is that I think it doesn't always have to do just with our relationship with somebody else. It definitely does. It often does. It's often the first step in recognizing how we relate to boundaries or what we really need. It is in relation to someone else. But first and foremost, it's in relation to us and how we relate to ourselves. What kind of boundaries we put around ourselves and how we address our needs. And so that is the other element that I think is pretty impactful in a discussion about boundaries and overwhelm. Are you addressing your needs? Well, my experience, and I know I have a lot of discussions with people behind the scenes that you're not really actually spending time addressing your needs, or if you are, they're tangential, or they're kind of like, well, I'll deal with that later. And when I say needs, I'm not talking about all the cliche self-care spa stuff. I'm talking about like real needs. The one that you're thinking of when I just said that. The thing that maybe you've put it off for a very, very long time. That's a pretty profound thing that we don't always address. Our needs, because we're addressing always our kids' needs. So we have these needs. We need to identify our needs. And that'll help get us clearer as to why we feel overwhelmed. But when we start to get clearer on why we might be overwhelmed, it usually means that we have to put up some boundaries. Or more importantly, we have to recognize that there are boundaries. There is a difference between me and someone else, like my child. I don't have to address every single thing that they need. Or I have to recognize when I'm overstepping in trying to provide for somebody else's need and where I'm not addressing my own need in that moment. So we're talking about needs. Then we address overwhelm. Then we address boundaries. But then when we start to really put practical solutions or practical things in our realm so that we actually have those boundaries and they're firm, and they're not just firm, but they're working for us. When we do that, then we start to say, okay, so who am I? What am I all about? Let me explore more my identity, because now I have a strong sense of something isn't me and this person is outside of me and this is where I stop and they start. Well, if that's the case, then who am I? Identity becomes a big discussion. And then, of course, the ultimate discussion is, then what's your purpose? Why are you here? Your identity dictates what you're doing here. So why are you here? So I see it as kind of like almost like one of a pyramid or something, where you see one step adding to the next step. Rocks layered on top of rocks, so that you create this big, beautiful pyramid. Or you could think of Maslow's hierarchy, but just an entirely different framework, which I don't have a title for. But I'm thinking we need to address our needs, which will help us deal with our overwhelm. And to help us deal with our overwhelm, we have to get serious about boundary issues. And to deal with our boundary issues, we're going to have to identify, well, who am I anyway? And if you know who you are, then you know what you're supposed to do. And these are the things that I think are the most important elements for you to take care of you, or to nurture you. Discussion that I had today is somebody was describing to me how she feels like she's locked in a cage, but she knows that she has the key in her pocket. She just doesn't want to leave the cage. She has the key, but she doesn't want to leave the cage. If you're in that scenario, I think we should talk, because ultimately this entire Homeschool Mama self-care thing is about freedom, and is about you coming into your own so that you can realize who you really are and do the thing you were meant to do here, whether that's in your homeschool, in your family, or just on the planet. Freedom. You have the key in your pocket. Now, why aren't you leaving the cage? Last thought I had was that in the last little while, I am doing some more landscaping, because it's a not so balmy April. It's actually quite a cold April over here in southwestern British Columbia. And I've been working on landscaping. I've been working on pouring pea gravel on a particular path, where I'm gathering up rocks that are fairly hefty size, looking for flat rocks to build into this walkway. And if you know me, you know that I don't have a strong back, that I had an injury back when I was 19, and it still influences me today. And I can't do all of the things that I think I can do or tell myself I can do without having some pain or some trouble. But I'm part way through building that walkway. It's starting to come together. It looks pretty good for somebody that has no idea how to do stonemasonry. And so I'm starting to build it, and I realize as I'm looking around my yard, the snow is melted. I can see there's no grass, there's nothing really green, maybe a few small snow anemones, but not much. And I'm looking around and realizing that every single perennial garden or raised bed in my garden, or all the walkways are lined with rocks, significant sized rocks, because they outline my garden beds. There are a lot of them. I wish I could take you live to go see all of them. And at some point earlier in our years here, the kids did help me build them, but it has been primarily me that's created these perennial beds and flower beds and garden beds. It has been a very, very, very long time and a lot of effort for me to create a homestead on raw land with a whole lot of rocks and not a lot of soil. But I've created those garden beds over years, and I thought about trying to explain to you about how to build boundaries or how to build tools or strategies in your life that could truly bring you freedom, how long that really takes. It takes a while. It takes a long while sometimes. And sometimes in these small efforts or these what appear to be small projects, like me building this tiny little stepstone walkway, you'd think that was just a few days, but that was a lot of Advil and hot water bottles and massages and all of that just to do one little tiny portion. And that reminds me an awful lot like this path to freedom, this path to quietness, to confidence, to clarity. And it's never ending either, because the onslaught of weather will break down those rocks, and then I'll have to regather them and put them back into place. But that's looking forward. I can see all of these garden beds, and I can see all of the work that I put into them, and I can tell you the formula for doing that, just as I could theoretically give you a formula to freedom, except that you have your own stories as to how you have to build your own pathways. You have to build your own garden beds with your own materials that are found in your own backyard. It's exciting and it's beautiful. I'm going to take a video later when there is something green out there to show you, and you can see all the work that I've done. You can't see all of what has been done in here unless I tell you. But I can tell you this: if you are on the side of, boy, that sounds nice, but it sounds like something that's kind of unreachable, I'll tell you this: it's not. It is a lot of work. It might take you very many years for you to feel like you're truly establishing some experience of freedom, but it can be done. And that is what I wanted to share for coffee time. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And let me know.